Hands off him. He's just some broke dad trying to sneak into the VIP floor.
A guard sneered as rough fingers slammed the man against marble. They laughed when the maintenance worker touched the sealed elevator panel. Said he'd contaminate everything just by breathing. Then the security system began screaming, and only he knew what to do, because the man they mocked had built systems like this before. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below, because beneath this chaos was a father racing a clock nobody else could see. The uniformed men kept tightening their grip, but the single dad didn't thrash or plead. He looked past them, counting the flicker of red lights above the elevator doors, listening to the pitch of the alarm as if it were speaking directly to him. Something inside that tower was failing, and it wasn't just human decency. Up in a private control room, unseen eyes watched everything. The moment felt small to the people in the lobby, just another disturbance in a place built for the rich to forget the world. To him, it was the edge of a cliff, because on the other side of those locked doors his little girl was fighting for every breath. He exhaled slowly, steadying his hands, and the guards mistook that calm for surrender. It wasn't. The man they had grabbed was a night maintenance worker named Eli Moreno, but that label was only the thinnest layer of who he was. Beneath the oil-stained uniform and tired eyes lived a mind trained to read danger like a map, a skill earned in places far louder and deadlier than this gleaming hotel. "Sir, you need to calm down," one guard muttered, though the one who wasn't calm was clearly him. He didn't argue. He shifted his weight just enough to ease the pressure on his wrists, eyes still fixed on the elevator's blinking panel. Every third blink was slower than the rest, a sign of a cascading lock failure. Whoever had programmed this system hadn't expected it to be under stress, and right now it was choking. 6 floors above, Lena Moreno lay on a plush carpet in a private suite, her small chest hitching as her inhaler ran dry. She'd wandered there after a coughing fit, thinking it would be closer to help, not realizing she'd crossed into a restricted zone that sealed itself when the alarms went off. Down in the lobby, her father felt it like a phantom pain. The hotel's grand atrium glimmered with chandeliers and polished stone, but to him it was just another enclosed space filling with invisible threats. The hum of the ventilation system had dropped half a tone, a subtle shift that meant airflow was being rerouted somewhere else. "Hey, you're not paid to stare at that," another guard snapped, shoving him again. He finally spoke, voice low and even. "You're locking people into a failing system. That elevator's about to go dead." They scoffed, because in their world, a man in coveralls didn't get to be right about anything that mattered. Behind a wall of glass in the owner's security suite, Serafina Vale leaned forward in her chair. The billionaire hotel magnate had been reviewing occupancy data when the disturbance popped onto her screens. She saw the guards, the man in maintenance gear, the flashing red of a partial lockdown. Most problems in her life were solved with a signature or a phone call, but this one felt different. The system she'd invested millions in was stuttering, and the staff she trusted to enforce order looked suddenly clumsy. Back on the marble floor, the single dad felt the vibration through his boots as a service elevator somewhere below misaligned. The building was talking, and he was the only one listening. "Please," he said, and the word carried more weight than they expected. "My kid's up there." For a heartbeat, even the guards hesitated. Then training and prejudice kicked back in, and they tightened their grip because rules were easier than empathy. He closed his eyes for half a second, picturing Lena's freckled face, the way she laughed when he made pancakes shaped like animals. The memory wasn't a distraction, it was a tether, keeping him anchored while everything else tilted. "Sir, you're not authorized," someone barked, but the words barely registered. He shifted again, not to break free, but to line himself up with a maintenance panel hidden behind a decorative column. If he could just get one hand loose, he could open it, access the manual override, and buy her time. The alarms wailed louder, echoing through the atrium like a warning from some ancient machine that had finally had enough. Guests began to murmur, their expensive shoes shuffling on the floor as unease rippled outward. In the control room, Serafina's fingers hovered over a command she didn't quite trust. She'd built her empire on efficiency and automation, but watching this unfold made her wonder if she'd forgotten something essential. The guards dragged him a step away from the column, and for the first time a flicker of real fear cut through his calm. Not for himself, nay, but for the tiny lungs struggling far above. "Don't do this," he said, the plea sharp now. "You're running out of time." They didn't believe him, because they couldn't imagine a man like him knowing more than their screens. The building, however, didn't care what they believed, and somewhere deep in its core another system tripped, pushing everything closer to the edge. He drew in a careful breath, feeling the grit of fear and resolve mix in his chest, and prepared to make his move even if it cost him everything. The guards finally released him, shoving him toward a service corridor that smelled of dust, cleaning chemicals, and old carpet glue. Eli moved with deliberate calm, every step measured, as if the hallway itself were an extension of his mind. He didn't glance back at the guards who had nearly crushed him, nor at the guests craning their necks from the atrium above. His focus was entirely on the locked floor, on the faint sound of mechanical whirring that told him which doors were still active, and on the tiny beacon of life he had to reach. Lena's breathing had grown ragged, each inhalation shallow, punctuated by the wheeze of her asthma. The automated oxygen monitors in her suite had tripped, but without an engineer to manually override the system, they were useless. Every elevator button he passed, every biometric scanner he bypassed with careful knowledge, became a lifeline threaded toward her. He understood that time was fracturing. Every second lost could become irreversible. The service doors creaked as Eli pressed his weight against one, feeling the tension of the hydraulic lock resist him. He adjusted a panel with the edge of his palm, manipulating exposed circuits just enough to regain control over airflow. A soft hiss confirmed partial success, and he felt a flicker of hope, brief but real. Security cameras above panned lazily, failing to capture the small miracle occurring in their blind spots. In the security suite, Serafina Vale leaned forward, a sudden tension in her shoulders. For the first time, she saw that the man she'd dismissed as a simple night maintenance worker might be the only one capable of saving not just the child, but the integrity of the entire floor. Her fingers hovered over her tablet, hesitant, as she realized that control in this situation was not something money could guarantee. The systems she had built were faltering under crisis, and the only human who could respond was standing quietly in a dust-filled corridor. "Dad?" Lena's weak voice crackled faintly through the comm system. She'd found a makeshift line connecting the hallway phones to the suite, a link so fragile it barely carried her. I can't breathe." Eli's chest tightened. "I hear you, Princess. Hang on." He moved faster now, but still with precision. Each step, each motion, reflected the expertise honed in years he never spoke of, the military drills, the emergency response training, the high-rise lockdown protocols he had once commanded. No one in that gleaming hotel could imagine that this humble figure was a former crisis response engineer, a man who had orchestrated evacuations of far larger disasters than a single hotel. A door alarm shrieked behind him, signaling that security had detected the breach. Guards scrambled, shouting orders he didn't acknowledge. He didn't have time to engage. His focus was solely on the sequence of valves, levers, and override switches that now dictated Lena's survival. Each panel he touched sent a pulse of control back to the suite, restoring oxygen and stabilizing the miniaturized environment. One guard lunged to block him. Eli sidestepped smoothly, using the man's momentum to guide him toward a safe position without harm. The brute force meant to intimidate became irrelevant. Knowledge and calm rendered him untouchable. Meanwhile, higher above, the VIP lounge patrons murmured, unaware of the crisis unfolding just floors below them. Their champagne glasses chimed against silver trays, oblivious to the child trapped in a suite, and to the father silently dismantling the systems they believed were infallible. For the first time, wealth and status offered no leverage. Only skill and presence of mind could prevail. "Dad?" Lena's voice sounded again, a whisper stronger than before. I think it's working." Eli allowed a brief nod of reassurance, though he didn't stop. The panel hummed under his fingers as he initiated the full manual override, linking the suite's safety protocols to an auxiliary power feed he'd identified in the service corridor. He was threading a lifeline invisible to everyone else. Somewhere behind a tinted glass wall, Serafina Vale leaned closer to the screen. Her expression softened, conflicted but alert. She had underestimated him. Her assumptions about class, role, and visibility had been wrong. And in that moment, she recognized that authority could falter without knowledge, and that sometimes the most important leaders were the ones nobody noticed. Eli adjusted the last connection. A green light blinked on the suite's emergency panel. Airflow stabilized. Lena coughed softly, then inhaled with strength returning. The crisis was not over, but the worst of it had passed. He allowed himself a small exhale, letting tension ripple through him, though he remained vigilant. The guards regrouped, frustrated, shouting orders he ignored, while the rest of the staff began to murmur about what they had just witnessed. A janitor's coveralls had outmaneuvered trained security. A single father had restored a failing system that the owner herself had trusted blindly. By the way, if you're watching this, hit subscribe with the bell on because these stories reveal heroes you never expect. People whose quiet expertise changes lives while the world overlooks them. Eli finally paused, leaning against a maintenance panel, listening to Lena's steady breathing transmitted from her suite. His face was calm, almost serene, though every muscle in his body still hummed with alertness. The public humiliation from earlier felt distant, replaced by something else. Quiet vindication, anchored in competence, skill, and the sheer force of a father's love. Above him, Serafina's eyes remained fixed on the monitor, a mixture of awe, worry, and dawning respect. For the first time, she realized that her luxury, her authority, and her automated empire were secondary to the human mind that could respond under pressure. And that mind, for all appearances, belonged to the man she had dismissed. The building itself seemed to exhale as systems stabilized, the hum of electricity and air returning to a steady rhythm. The crisis was still active elsewhere, but one floor, one life, one small victory had been claimed. Eli pulled himself upright, ready to continue, each step now charged with quiet power. He moved toward the next challenge, knowing that the true test was still unfolding. He had regained control, but the public eyes, the observers, and the hotel's failing systems were about to demand more than anyone anticipated. Wordlessly, he prepared to turn his hidden expertise into the decisive edge that would ensure his daughter's safety and his own vindication. Eli pressed forward down the service corridor, the fluorescent lights flickering above him, casting uneven shadows that stretched like silent witnesses. Each step was careful, precise, as he listened for the faintest hum or click from the locked doors above. The hotel's emergency system, designed to protect, had become a trap. Every security lockdown now threatened to cut off Lena from vital air and assistance. Eli's hands skimmed over exposed wires and junction boxes, reading patterns only someone with his training could interpret. The red warning lights pulsed faster as he moved closer to the suite, the sound slicing through the distant murmur of guests oblivious to the danger just floors above them. From the surveillance suite, Serafina Vale's eyes darted between multiple screens. The billionaire magnate was still struggling to process what she saw. The maintenance worker she had dismissed moments ago was navigating the infrastructure of her hotel with authority and calm she couldn't replicate. Her tablet vibrated with alerts. Doors that should have remained sealed were opening, oxygen levels fluctuating, and the building's automated fail-safes tripping repeatedly. She reached for her headset, intending to instruct her staff, but paused. Something told her she couldn't command this situation remotely. She needed him. "Dad?" Lena's voice came again, faint but clearer than before. "I think I can breathe better now." A surge of relief hit him like a punch in the chest, but he didn't stop. He had learned to compartmentalize emotion in his previous life, to let it inform him without controlling him. Now, that skill allowed him to focus fully on the task ahead, stabilizing the full floor and preventing a complete collapse of the emergency systems. As he approached a junction, a head of security appeared, blocking his path with a menacing glare. "Stop right there. You're not authorized to touch anything else," the man barked. Eli didn't pause. He sidestepped, his body moving fluidly around the guard, redirecting the man's own momentum with minimal force. Each step was a blend of precision and instinct honed through years in high-stress operations. The guard stumbled slightly, and Eli used that microsecond to reconnect power lines that had tripped, routing them back into the suite's auxiliary system. The hiss of stabilizing oxygen and the soft buzz of restored airflow confirmed the success. Guests in the atrium above began whispering, glancing at security personnel as murmurs spread. The man they had dismissed as nothing more than a night maintenance worker had just outperformed trained security in a life-or-death scenario. Some reached for their phones, instinctively recording the events, while others simply watched, captivated by the improbable scene unfolding below. Eli paused at a service panel, crouching to inspect a series of complex overrides. His fingers danced over the controls, recalibrating sensors that had been misaligned during the initial lockdown. He knew every system intimately: ventilation, emergency lighting, backup power, and each adjustment was critical. A single misstep could plunge Lena back into danger. "Sir, you don't know what you're doing," shouted another guard who had arrived behind him. He didn't answer. Words were useless here. His training, experience, and quick assessment of the building's failing systems were the only things that mattered. He worked with quiet determination, bypassing automated restrictions, overriding locks, and guiding critical airflow toward the suite. Above him, Serafina Vale's pulse quickened as she realized the full scope of what he was doing. Her automated systems designed to replace human judgment were failing. Her staff, trained and armed with protocols, were floundering. Only one man, someone she had looked down on, was capable of bringing order. Eli tapped into a manual override port, and the indicator light shifted from red to steady green. Oxygen flow was fully restored. Elevators began responding again, and emergency lighting stabilized. He felt the weight of authority in that moment, not because he commanded anyone, but because he held the key to life itself. Lena coughed softly, then inhaled with more strength. Relief coursed through him, tempered by the knowledge that the floor wasn't entirely secure yet. Every system needed monitoring, every door had to be checked, and every security measure had to be recalibrated. The crisis was far from over, but a turning point had been reached. From the atrium, murmurs escalated as guests witnessed guards deferring to Eli, following instructions they never expected to receive from a uniformed maintenance worker. The image of authority and competence was shifting, and even those in power could sense it. The janitor's coveralls hid a brilliance no one had imagined, and the building itself seemed to yield to his presence. He moved to the next junction, adjusting controls, listening to the faint echoes of Lena's breath, and tracking system fluctuations with a practiced eye. Time was both enemy and ally, each second pressing the urgency of the task into every nerve of his body. Serafina leaned back in her chair, finally speaking into the headset. "Leave him alone. Let him do it," she commanded, her tone reluctant but firm. The words carried weight now because she understood the truth. Her authority alone was insufficient. Only his skill could save the child and prevent catastrophe. The hum of the building gradually steadied as Eli completed the final calibration on that segment of the floor. Red lights turned green, alarms muted, and, for the first time since the crisis began, he allowed a small nod to himself, a brief acknowledgement that the immediate danger to Lena had been mitigated. He didn't celebrate. There was more work to do. He had proven his expertise under pressure, shifted the perception of authority, and begun reclaiming dignity in a place that had almost crushed him. The stage was set for the full resolution, but the fight to stabilize the entire hotel was only beginning. And for viewers following along, here's a reminder. Hit subscribe with the bell on because stories like this show that the quiet, underestimated people often hold the power to change everything. Eli pressed forward through the dimly lit service corridor, every step deliberate, his eyes scanning panels, junctions, and exposed wiring with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime understanding complex systems. The building hummed around him, a living organism under stress, its alarms still echoing faintly from floors he hadn't yet secured. Each system he touched was a thread in the fragile web holding the VIP suite and Lena's fragile life together. The guards lingered behind, uncertain, as if their presence mattered at all in the face of his quiet mastery. He crouched before a junction panel tucked behind a utility closet, fingertips brushing over the exposed circuitry. Years of training as a crisis response engineer and military emergency officer had taught him to read the subtle signs of stress in mechanical and electronic systems. He traced the source of an oxygen fluctuation, noting a slight resistance in the tubing that no automated sensor had detected. The auxiliary backup valves were misaligned, slowly redirecting airflow away from Lena's suite. Without correction, her breathing would falter again in minutes. Above, Serafina Vale leaned over her monitors, tension etched into every line of her face. She had watched Eli maneuver through the infrastructure with calm assurance, but now she saw him manipulate something far more delicate, the very lifeline sustaining a child. Her own engineers had attempted similar adjustments minutes ago and failed. She realized, finally, that wealth, power, and automation could not replace expertise in crisis. Only this man, underestimated and dismissed, could navigate what her empire could not. Eli's fingers worked rapidly, manipulating the valves with the exact force required to restore balance. Each click, each hiss of returning airflow, resonated with the subtle rhythm of the child's lungs. He felt a surge of relief when the red alarm indicator above the suite flickered and turned a steady green. Lena's oxygen levels stabilized, and the suite's environmental controls began to function as intended. The guards shifted nervously behind him. Their earlier aggression had been fueled by assumptions that the maintenance worker posed a threat, that his actions could be ignored. Now, as systems hummed under his guidance, their doubts became visible in rigid postures and hesitant glances. Authority had been inverted silently, and they were powerless to contest it. "Sir, how are you doing that?" one guard stammered, voice low. Eli didn't answer. His mind was already moving to the next junction, the next segment of the failing floor. Words were unnecessary. Results spoke louder. Every manual override, every carefully measured adjustment was proof of his expertise. In the suite, Lena coughed lightly, but her breaths deepened. Relief washed through him, but he maintained focus. The crisis wasn't contained, and every floor above and below remained a potential hazard. The hum of elevators, the vibration of failing HVAC units, and the distant clamor of confused guests all created a tense symphony. Eli had to stay ahead of it, anticipating every failure before it manifested. From the security suite, Serafina's gaze softened. She had never seen such calm under pressure. The man she had dismissed as a low-level worker was proving that real authority comes not from title, but from skill and decisiveness. Her voice broke slightly as she spoke into her headset, overriding security protocols for the first time. "Clear the corridor. Let him proceed." Her command carried the weight of someone admitting she had underestimated the quiet, capable force before her. Eli moved deeper into the mechanical corridors, adjusting power reroutes and verifying emergency lighting. The faint orange glow of backup lights reflected off the walls, illuminating his worn work boots and oil-stained uniform. There was a strange poetry in the juxtaposition. A humble father walking through the veins of a luxury hotel, orchestrating life-saving systems with expertise that none present could comprehend. Another guard stepped forward, attempting to redirect him. Eli paused for a brief moment, reading the man's intentions, then used a subtle maneuver to redirect him without confrontation. Each obstacle was neutralized, not with force, but with precision, he allowing him to maintain momentum toward the suite. Lena's voice came faintly again. "Dad, I'm better." The words were weak, but enough to give him a measured sense of urgency met with success. He allowed himself a subtle nod, a quiet acknowledgement of progress before moving onward. The atrium above remained filled with oblivious guests, their chatter and laughter contrasting sharply with the silent heroism unfolding below. Eli's movements were invisible to them, but each adjustment he made had immediate consequences on their safety as well. He was not just saving his daughter, he was stabilizing an entire floor of lives, a fact that would only be recognized later. By the time he reached the final junction leading to the suite, Eli had rerouted oxygen, recalibrated ventilation, and restored partial power. The alarms had dulled to low beeps, and the first signs of stability glimmered in the flickering monitors. He prepared to engage the last override switch, the final link that would fully stabilize the floor and ensure Lena's safety. Serafina watched, breath caught in her throat. She understood now what had gone unseen. Her empire could crumble in moments, but the quiet father moving through her hotel's hidden veins held life in his hands. He was the true master of this crisis, and the reversal of judgment, humiliation, and disbelief was imminent. The corridor was silent except for the soft hum of machinery and Eli's measured movements. The crisis was far from over, but a turning point had been reached. The single father, underestimated and overlooked, had begun the process of restoring life, safety, and dignity not only for his child but for everyone trapped in the hotel above. The emergency alarms still echoed faintly through the corridors, but Eli had gained control over the critical systems on the VIP floor. He crouched before a panel of blinking switches, the metallic hum vibrating through his palms as he traced the sequence of airflow and oxygen levels. Every lever and dial responded to his touch with subtle resistance, confirming that the building's failing safety systems were under his precise command. His mind raced ahead, predicting the next cascade of failures that could trap Lena or other guests if left unaddressed. Each calculation, each mental simulation had been honed in previous high-stakes crises he never spoke of: evacuations, lockdowns, systems under siege, skills now serving a purpose far closer to home. From the observation suite above, Serafina Vale leaned forward, tension tight in her shoulders. The billionaire owner had watched the maintenance man orchestrate stabilizations that her engineers had failed to achieve. Her pride warred with necessity. She wanted to intervene, to assert authority, but she realized that her empire's very systems were now subordinate to his expertise. She spoke softly into her headset, her voice shaking slightly. "All security, clear the corridors. Let him handle this." Even as she gave the order, the weight of her previous misjudgment pressed heavily on her chest. She had underestimated him, and the realization was almost unbearable. Eli didn't look up. His focus remained on the junction panel before him, connecting oxygen and emergency power lines with delicate precision. The red indicator lights gradually dimmed as he restored partial control, each blink signaling a life stabilized. Lena's breathing through the comm system was becoming steadier, giving him the feedback necessary to adjust the remaining systems. He could feel the pulse of the building, the vibration of energy flows, the minute shifts of pressure within ducts, and each tiny variation guided his hands like a compass. Behind him, 2 guards lingered nervously. Earlier, they had gripped him with force, convinced of his guilt or incompetence. Now, their movements were hesitant, their eyes flicking between his calm assurance and the blinking panels responding instantly to his touch. They had begun to recognize, slowly, that authority wasn't conferred by uniform or title. It was earned by skill and decisiveness. He reached for the final circuit box on this stretch of floor. The lock had partially jammed, likely from the initial panic that had caused the automated system to overcorrect. A single misalignment here could plunge the entire suite back into dangerous oxygen deprivation. Eli's fingers worked with meticulous care, bypassing the jam and rerouting auxiliary power through a secondary feed he had identified earlier in the corridor. The hiss of stabilized airflow filled the space, a quiet but unmistakable confirmation of success. Up above, Serafina's hands tightened around the edge of her desk. She had been trained to control situations from afar, relying on data and reports, but she now understood the limits of detachment. Technology and wealth could only get her so far. Human judgment under pressure remained irreplaceable, for she realized that the quiet man moving through her service corridors was her best, and perhaps only, chance to prevent disaster. Eli moved on, checking connections and verifying stability at multiple points along the corridor. Each junction he touched extended a lifeline, a thread of stability linking the suite to the building's emergency systems. The hum of machinery under his hands was no longer chaotic. It followed the rhythm he imposed, a harmony of control born of skill and experience. "Dad?" Lena's voice was stronger now, more coherent. "I feel better." Relief coursed through him, but he kept his focus, knowing that temporary improvement wasn't enough. The floor was partially stabilized, but full recovery required more precise intervention. He had to ensure no secondary failures could undo the progress he had made. A loud thud echoed down the corridor as a guard tried to intervene again. Eli pivoted smoothly, using the man's momentum to guide him aside without confrontation. His body moved with the efficiency and calm of someone who had learned to neutralize obstacles without unnecessary force. Each step, each adjustment was deliberate. Every action saved precious seconds that could mean life or death for Lena and other guests trapped on the floor. From the atrium, whispers began spreading among guests who had gathered to watch the unfolding events. They saw a man in coveralls manipulating panels, bypassing security, and taking control of a dangerous situation. The contrast was striking. The polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers of the hotel, the arrogant security officers, and the single father orchestrating life-saving systems unnoticed. And social hierarchy, wealth, and authority were powerless here. Only knowledge, precision, and courage mattered. Eli paused to check the final indicator for this section. Oxygen levels were normalized, ventilation flowing correctly, and backup power synchronized. He allowed himself the briefest nod, acknowledging the success without breaking concentration. The immediate danger for Lena was mitigated, but the crisis was far from over. Other systems remained unstable, and the floor's integrity depended on him maintaining focus and control. He moved to the next corridor junction, preparing to extend his influence to stabilize the remaining emergency systems. Each step was both literal and symbolic. A father reclaiming authority over a situation that had threatened to render him powerless. A quiet hero proving that true skill and courage can overturn assumptions and hierarchy. By the way, if you're following this story, make sure to hit subscribe with the bell on because you don't want to miss how he completes the full stabilization and turns humiliation into vindication. Eli pressed forward into the next service junction, the faint hum of machinery guiding his every step. The hotel's emergency systems had stabilized partially, but pockets of danger remained. Faulty valves, misaligned vents, and overtaxed circuits threatened to undo everything he had worked for. He moved deliberately, hands steady, eyes scanning each panel with the practiced precision of someone who had spent years orchestrating high-stakes evacuations. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting shadows that danced along the corridor. But he remained unfazed. Every system he touched obeyed his instincts, every adjustment calibrated perfectly to prevent disaster. Lena's soft cough came through the makeshift intercom, her small voice the anchor that kept his focus sharp. "Dad, it's okay, I think." The relief in her tone spurred him on, but he didn't allow himself to relax. Every second counted, and any mistake could reverse the fragile progress he had achieved. He reached for a panel controlling the backup oxygen feed and noticed a minor misalignment. A valve slightly open in the wrong direction, diverting air away from the suite. Without hesitation, he adjusted it, listening as the hiss of returning airflow grew steady and strong. Above him, Serafina Vale leaned closer to her monitors, tension etched into her features. The billionaire hotel owner had been forced to watch a man she had dismissed as a low-level worker maneuver through the hidden veins of her empire with unparalleled competence. Her engineers had attempted similar adjustments earlier and failed repeatedly. The realization that she was powerless to correct the system herself weighed heavily on her. She gritted her teeth and spoke into her headset, overriding the security team. "Do not interfere. Let him do it." For the first time, she had to admit that her assumptions about authority and capability had been entirely wrong. Eli moved along the corridor, connecting auxiliary feeds and stabilizing power conduits, each movement precise and purposeful. He bypassed locked junctions, rerouted failing circuits, and manually corrected ventilation misalignments. The guards, who had earlier dragged him down marble hallways, now watched in hesitant awe, their previous aggression replaced with cautious compliance. Authority had shifted quietly, invisibly, yet irrevocably. "Dad?" Lena's voice came again, slightly stronger this time. I can breathe. Her words, though weak, carried a promise of survival. Eli allowed himself a brief smile, though he did not pause. The floor remained partially unstable. His work was far from finished. He paused at a central conduit junction, assessing the full network of systems. The hum of electricity, the vibration of ductwork, and the soft hiss of regulated airflow combined into a rhythm he could read like a heartbeat. Every calculation, every prediction, every minute adjustment he made was grounded in his past training, a mix of military operations and emergency engineering that had prepared him for crises far larger than a single hotel floor. Now, that hidden expertise was the only thing standing between life and catastrophe. From the security suite, Serafina watched silently as Eli moved with unshakable confidence. The man she had almost dismissed had become the fulcrum on which the entire floor's safety rested. The subtle inversion of power, the quiet command over systems she had built to control every outcome, filled her with a mix of awe and regret. Every instinct she had relied upon had failed her. Only this man's skill was preventing disaster. Eli crouched before another panel, adjusting airflow distribution to the suite. Each small movement was critical. A miscalibration of even a fraction could leave Lena exposed to inadequate oxygen. He traced the lines from the primary conduits to the auxiliary feeds, ensuring that every bypassed system complemented the existing infrastructure. Red indicator lights slowly shifted to green, one by one, confirming that stability was returning. A guard approached again, hesitant. "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" he asked, voice tight. Eli didn't answer verbally. He merely gestured for the man to step aside, his calm authority enough to redirect the hesitant guard without confrontation. Every motion reinforced that knowledge, not uniform, dictated control here. The faint rumble of elevators returning to function echoed through the service shafts. The building's automated systems began responding predictably again, no longer in rebellion against the crisis. Eli's hands moved quickly, coordinating the synchronization of ventilation, backup power, and oxygen systems. The immediate danger to Lena had been neutralized, but the full stabilization of the floor was still underway. In the corridor, he finally allowed himself a measured exhale, the tension coiling through his muscles loosening slightly. The crisis had shifted from immediate life threat to controlled stabilization. He had regained the edge, proving the power of calm expertise in the face of chaos, the authority that comes from skill and not title. Above, Serafina's expression softened, admiration mingling with a newfound respect. She realized that this single father, underestimated and overlooked, had orchestrated life-saving actions that no one else in the hotel could have managed. Humility and recognition were dawning simultaneously, an acknowledgement of competence where it had been ignored before. Eli moved on toward the next junction, preparing to extend his influence across the remaining systems, the quiet determination of a man who had mastered life and death stakes guiding every decision. The turning point had arrived. He was no longer just reacting. He was leading, quietly and decisively, toward the full resolution that would secure his daughter's safety and restore dignity that had been denied him. Eli approached the central service hub, the heart of the hotel's emergency systems, where the corridors converged into a tangle of pipes, vents, and electrical conduits. Every panel here controlled multiple floors, and any misstep could send cascading failures through the VIP suites above. He paused for a moment, listening to the soft whine of machinery, the vibration of failing circuits beneath his boots. Each hum, each subtle shift, told him exactly what needed attention, and he moved with precision born of countless high-stakes scenarios he had survived in the past. Lena's voice crackled faintly through the comm system, reminding him of the stakes. "Dad, I can breathe. Thank you." That tiny lifeline, her trust, anchored him even as adrenaline pushed through his veins. Above, Serafina Vale watched the screens intently, her pulse quickening with each successful adjustment he made. She had sent her security team to clear the corridor earlier, and now she realized that every step Eli took was a calculation that no protocol or automation could replicate. Her pride warred with relief. She had dismissed him as a lowly maintenance worker, and yet here he was, taking control of the crisis she could not manage. For the first time, she felt the weight of genuine dependence on someone entirely outside her social hierarchy, and it unsettled her. Eli crouched before the central panel, tracing the wiring with fingers that moved with deliberate care. Auxiliary power lines hummed under his touch, and he rerouted airflow to stabilize the suites affected by the initial system failures. He adjusted a valve, recalibrated a pressure regulator, and watched the indicator lights blink from red to steady green. Every system he touched responded flawlessly, a testament to his deep understanding of mechanical and electrical interdependence. A security guard attempted to intervene, approaching him cautiously. "Sir, you shouldn't be touching that," the man warned, uncertainty thick in his voice. Eli didn't respond with words. Instead, he gestured subtly, redirecting the guard's movement while continuing his adjustments. Knowledge, not authority, dictated the flow here. Every action reinforced his invisible command over the space, proving that skill alone could override position. The hum of returning airflow intensified, filling the corridors with a low, soothing vibration. Red emergency lights began to fade, replaced by stable green indicators as the system synchronized. Eli's eyes tracked each reading, confirming that the oxygen levels in Lena's suite and the surrounding areas were steady. He allowed himself a subtle nod, but there was no relaxation yet. The entire floor still needed his guidance to maintain complete stability. Lena's voice came again, stronger now, filled with the fragile hope of survival. "Dad, I think I'm okay." The words propelled him forward with renewed focus. He moved to the final auxiliary panel for the floor, connecting the last feed to ensure redundancy. Every adjustment reinforced the stability of the systems and guaranteed that no single failure could jeopardize life again. From the atrium, murmurs had begun to spread among guests who had witnessed glimpses of the chaos and the single father's calm precision. Whispers carried phrases like, "He knows what he's doing," and "How is he managing that?" Social hierarchy had temporarily inverted. The man they assumed powerless was now the invisible force holding life itself together. Even the guards had begun to defer subtly to his authority, recognizing that interference would only compromise their fragile progress. Serafina's fingers hovered over her tablet, reluctant to intervene further. She watched as Eli orchestrated life-saving adjustments with the confidence of someone whose skill could not be questioned. Every move was deliberate, precise, and controlled, leaving no room for doubt. Her previous assumptions about status, wealth, and command were dissolving under the undeniable evidence before her. Eli completed the final connection, a subtle hum signaling that the backup power and oxygen systems were fully integrated. The corridor lights brightened, alarms muted, and the faint vibration of machinery indicated that the building was no longer in immediate danger. The immediate threat to Lena and other guests on the floor had been neutralized, but the remaining task was to maintain stability until full restoration could occur. He stepped back slightly, scanning the corridor and the panels one last time. Each system responded as expected. Each indicator confirmed the success of his interventions. He allowed himself a measured exhale, the tension in his muscles loosening slightly though his focus remained unwavering. The critical portion of the crisis had passed, but vigilance was still necessary. Eli moved toward the last service junction before the suite, each step silent but purposeful. He knew that the final stabilization required him to maintain control over both the environment and the perception of authority around him. Every adjustment now would cement the reversal of humiliation and demonstrate that knowledge and skill could triumph over assumptions of status. Eli reached the final corridor leading to Lena's suite, the central hub where multiple emergency systems converged. The flicker of overhead lights reflected in his eyes as he assessed the intricate network of valves, ducts, and backup power conduits. Each panel here controlled life-sustaining elements: oxygen, temperature, air circulation, and emergency lighting. Any misstep could undo the hours of careful stabilization he had already accomplished. His hands moved with unshakable precision, fingers tracing circuits, toggling switches, and monitoring the delicate feedback of the suite's internal systems. Every adjustment was informed by years of experience: military emergency drills, engineering crises, and life-or-death situations no one in this hotel could imagine. Above, Serafina Vale leaned forward in her chair, tension radiating from her shoulders. Her empire relied on automation, on protocols designed to prevent human error, but she now realized the limits of her designs. Eli, the man she had dismissed as a lowly maintenance worker, was orchestrating the stabilization with a mastery that she could neither replicate nor command. She picked up her headset, hesitating before speaking, finally saying, "Leave him. Do not interfere." It was a command born of respect, the first acknowledgement of his authority. Eli's focus never wavered. He moved to a junction controlling auxiliary oxygen feeds, detecting a minor misalignment threatening to divert air away from Lena's suite. Without hesitation, he recalibrated the valve, restoring steady airflow. A soft hiss confirmed success, and the red light indicator shifted to green. Lena's breathing became more regular, a tiny victory reinforcing the momentum he had gained. The security guards who had initially grabbed him lingered in the corridor, their earlier aggression replaced by cautious compliance. They watched as he worked, hesitant to interfere, recognizing instinctively that his knowledge surpassed their training. Each of his movements radiated calm authority, a quiet command that demanded acknowledgement even without words. Social hierarchy had inverted. The lowly maintenance worker was now the uncontested master of the floor's safety. Eli moved along the final set of control panels, connecting backup power conduits to stabilize electrical systems feeding the suite. The hum of machinery responded immediately to his adjustments, a low, steady vibration indicating restored function. He monitored each sensor, ensuring that temperature, airflow, and oxygen levels remained within safe parameters. The child's survival was no longer just probable, it was now reliably secured. Lena's voice came through again, stronger and steadier. "Dad, I can breathe fine now." Relief washed over him, but he didn't allow complacency to creep in. Systems remained delicate, and complete stabilization required continuous attention until the building's automated protocols fully recovered. From the atrium, murmurs of astonishment spread among the guests. Those who had glimpsed the corridor realized that a man in work boots and coveralls had taken control where trained security and technology had failed. Whispers of admiration, disbelief, and curiosity rippled through the crowd. The invisible power of expertise and courage had upended social assumptions in real time. Serafina observed silently, her pride mingling with admiration. The single father's skill had not only preserved life, but also highlighted the fragility of her authority and the fallibility of her systems. She realized that wealth and status could not substitute for knowledge, courage, and decisive action under pressure. Eli paused briefly, scanning the final panels. Each one responded perfectly to his intervention. Oxygen flow stabilized, emergency power synchronized, ventilation calibrated. The floor was secure. The crisis that had begun with a humiliating grab in the marble lobby had shifted completely. Authority, competence, and survival now rested in the hands of the man they had underestimated. He stepped back slightly, letting the systems run, confident that Lena was safe for the first time in hours. The tension in his muscles loosened fractionally, but his mind remained sharp, anticipating any residual instability. The reversal of humiliation and the demonstration of true authority were nearly complete. By the way, hit subscribe with the bell on, because what you're seeing is how quiet expertise can turn humiliation into full vindication. And you won't want to miss how he finishes securing the floor and reveals the truth to everyone watching. Eli moved through the final service corridor toward Lena's suite, every step deliberate, his senses attuned to the subtle vibrations and hums of the hotel's machinery. The systems he had stabilized earlier were holding, but minor fluctuations in oxygen levels and air pressure signaled that further adjustments were necessary. He crouched before a junction panel, fingers tracing the wiring with precise care, recalibrating circuits to ensure redundancy in case of a secondary failure. Each flicker of the indicator lights told him exactly where attention was needed, and he worked methodically, combining instinct with experience honed through years of emergency engineering and military crisis response. The stakes had never been higher. Every movement could mean the difference between life and death. Above, Serafina Vale monitored him closely. Tension etched into her face. Her engineers had tried similar interventions and failed. Now she watched in quiet awe as a man she had dismissed orchestrated life-saving precision with the calm of someone accustomed to high-pressure crises. Her fingers hovered over her tablet, ready to intervene but knowing she couldn't match his skill. Authority, she realized, was not defined by title or wealth. It was earned through expertise and composure under pressure. Eli adjusted the auxiliary airflow feed, restoring a subtle imbalance that could have compromised the suite's oxygen circulation. A soft hiss confirmed the correction, and the red light indicator flickered and shifted steadily to green. Lena's breathing, transmitted faintly through the comm system, grew more stable. "Dad, I feel better," she whispered. The relief in her voice anchored him even as his focus remained razor-sharp. The crisis was only partially resolved. Two guards approached cautiously, unsure if they should intervene or stand aside. Eli did not acknowledge them verbally. Instead, he gestured subtly, redirecting their presence without breaking concentration. The implicit authority of skill was enough. His calm decisiveness communicated what words could not. They complied. A silent recognition that the single father before them was in control of a situation far beyond their understanding. The hum of the building's emergency systems grew steadier under his touch. He traced electrical conduits, verified ventilation ducts, and monitored backup power feeds. Every adjustment reinforced the stability of the floor, extending life-saving control from the suite to the surrounding areas. The indicators for oxygen, temperature, and airflow reflected the careful orchestration of a man whose expertise had been invisible until now. Serafina watched in awe as the reversal of fortune unfolded. The maintenance worker she had dismissed was no longer invisible. He had become the linchpin of the hotel's safety. Her pride mingled with respect as she acknowledged that her authority had been secondary to his competence. Every moment she observed him, she understood more fully the truth she had ignored, that real power in crisis resides in knowledge and execution, not in title or wealth. Eli paused at the last auxiliary panel, reconnecting the final feeds to ensure full redundancy. He ran one final check of oxygen levels, ventilation, and backup power synchronization. Each reading confirmed that the floor was stable, that Lena was safe, and that no immediate hazard remained. The critical phase of the crisis had been mitigated. He allowed himself a measured nod, a quiet acknowledgement of the progress achieved, though vigilance remained. Each system was under his control, each hazard neutralized, and yet he stayed alert, knowing that the final demonstration of his expertise, visible to all observers, was still ahead. From the atrium, whispers had grown louder among the guests. They had watched the man they assumed powerless take control of life-saving systems with the calm precision of an expert. Social hierarchies and assumptions were collapsing in real time, replaced by astonishment at skill and composure under pressure. The reversal of humiliation was near completion. Eli straightened, preparing to enter the final stretch of corridor leading to the suite itself. Each step was symbolic as well as practical. A single father reclaiming authority, ensuring his child's safety, and setting the stage for vindication witnessed by everyone who had doubted him. The final act of his quiet mastery was imminent, a convergence of skill, courage, and protective love that would leave no one questioning his capability again. Eli finally reached the corridor just outside Lena's suite, and the last threshold between him and the child he had been racing to protect. The air was warmer here, tinged with the faint metallic scent of emergency systems working overtime. Every panel, duct, and conduit he had stabilized led to this point, and now the final adjustments would determine whether the crisis was fully resolved. He crouched before the last junction box, tracing wires and calibrating airflow regulators with meticulous precision. Each flick of a switch, each slight adjustment was amplified by the cumulative stress of the past hours. The faint hum of the building had begun to settle into a steady rhythm, but his focus was unwavering. Nothing could be left to chance. Lena's voice, steady now, filtered softly through the comm system. "Dad, I'm okay." Relief washed over him, but he didn't allow himself to relax. The final phase required complete synchronization. Oxygen, temperature, and backup power systems had to work in harmony to ensure full safety for the suite and the surrounding floors. Any misalignment could trigger a setback, and Eli's hidden expertise made him the only one capable of orchestrating this delicate balance. Serafina Vale observed from the security suite, her expression a mixture of awe and grudging respect. She had seen engineers and security staff fail repeatedly, their attempts to regain control falling short. Now, the man she had almost dismissed as a lowly maintenance worker was achieving what none of them could. Every flicker of indicator lights, every hiss of stabilizing airflow, reinforced a truth she could no longer ignore. Skill, calm, and decisiveness were more powerful than authority and title. Eli adjusted the final airflow regulator, monitoring oxygen levels as they stabilized within safe parameters. The hum of the emergency systems grew smoother, more harmonious. He ran his hand along the conduits, confirming that power distribution was fully synchronized. Every indicator light shifted from red to steady green. Lena's breathing strengthened further, each inhalation steady and measured, confirming that she was now fully safe. The security guards who had previously restrained him watched silently, awe replacing uncertainty. Their presence was now ceremonial. Eli's calm authority and demonstrable skill made their interference unnecessary. One of them whispered almost to himself, "I never thought," but stopped, unable to articulate the enormity of what they were witnessing. From the atrium, murmurs had begun to swell. Guests who had glimpsed the events unfolding through windows and glass doors realized that the man they had dismissed was the one holding life and safety in his hands. Whispers of astonishment, admiration, and disbelief spread, reflecting the reversal of social hierarchy. The underestimated single father had become the undeniable authority in this high-stakes crisis. Eli moved into the suite itself, checking the final oxygen feed and ventilation ducts. Lena sat upright, small but visibly stronger, her eyes wide as she took in the familiar face of her father. The child's relief mirrored his own, a mixture of triumph, exhaustion, and quiet pride. He had navigated every danger, stabilized every system, and ensured her safety when others could not. Serafina's hands tightened around her tablet, the weight of her misjudgment evident. She had underestimated him at every turn, and now she had no choice but to acknowledge her error. The lowly maintenance worker, the single father, had achieved in minutes what her resources and authority could not. She exhaled slowly, a mixture of relief and humility, as she finally recognized his expertise. Eli surveyed the room one last time, ensuring every panel and system was fully synchronized. The building hummed steadily, the crisis fully contained. He straightened, allowing himself the briefest of nods, signaling the quiet victory of competence over assumptions, of skill over status, and of calm authority over panic and doubt. The moment had arrived for public vindication. The guards, the guests, and Serafina herself would witness the reversal. The man they had dismissed, underestimated, and restrained had proven indispensable. The stage was set for the final reveal, where the hidden expertise and quiet authority would finally claim the recognition they deserved. By the way, hit subscribe with the bell on because the next part reveals the moment everyone realizes who Eli truly is, and you won't want to miss it. Eli stepped back from the last panel, surveying the suite and the corridor leading from it. Every system he had touched was stable, oxygen flow steady, ventilation balanced, emergency power synchronized, and Lena's breathing was calm and regular. The immediate crisis had passed, but the moment of full vindication was approaching. He allowed himself a subtle exhale, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly, though his eyes remained sharp, scanning for any remaining anomalies. The building's hum was no longer chaotic. It responded to his interventions with quiet obedience. Serafina Vale rose from her chair, moving closer to the large glass window that overlooked the corridor. She had summoned key staff and security personnel to witness the final stabilization, sensing that this was more than a technical achievement. It was a revelation of skill, authority, and quiet power. She had watched Eli operate with unshakable calm, and now the full scale of his competence was about to be recognized by everyone who had doubted him. Pride, humility, and astonishment warred across her face. The guests, previously oblivious to the unfolding drama, had gathered near the atrium, peeking into the corridor. Whispers spread through the crowd. He did it. How is he doing that? That's impossible. Social hierarchies were visibly shifting in real time, and the man they assumed powerless was now the architect of safety for everyone present. The guards, who had once restrained him, stood silently to the side, their earlier aggression replaced by tentative admiration. Eli moved toward Lena, checking her oxygen mask and confirming the integrity of all auxiliary feeds. The child smiled weakly, a fragile but heartfelt expression of trust and relief. This small gesture underscored the stakes he had been protecting all along: family, life, and dignity intertwined. Each adjustment he had made in the corridors, each subtle manipulation of valves and circuits, had been in service of this moment. Serafina finally spoke, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. You're not just maintenance." Her words, simple yet loaded, acknowledged the inversion of authority that had unfolded. Eli didn't immediately respond. Instead, he allowed the systems themselves to testify to his expertise. The humming conduits, the steady airflow, and the synchronized power feeds all confirmed what she now understood. He was more than the uniform suggested. Eli turned slightly, allowing the gathered audience to witness his calm assurance and the flawless state of the systems. The revelation was quiet but undeniable. The single father they had dismissed as insignificant was, in fact, a former military engineer and crisis response expert, a man whose hidden skill had saved lives when wealth and authority could not. The guests murmured, eyes wide, as the truth settled over them. Authority had been quietly earned, competence recognized, and humiliation reversed. The guards exchanged glances, their previous assumptions shattered. Now one of them finally whispered aloud, "All this time, we had no idea." Eli nodded slightly, acknowledging their realization without condescension. Every movement, every adjustment he had made had led to this moment of undeniable mastery and recognition. Serafina stepped closer, her expression softened. She had learned a lesson in humility, that status and title could not replace knowledge, composure, and courage under pressure. She extended her hand, a gesture of respect and acknowledgement, recognizing the quiet hero before her. Eli shook it, not boastfully, but as a measured confirmation of his competence and the reversal of doubt. Lena, now fully stabilized, reached up and hugged her father, the small, trusting embrace grounding the scene in emotional truth. All the technical mastery, all the strategic adjustments, all the silent authority had been in service of this. Life and dignity preserved. The room, the corridor, and the atrium bore witness to a transformation. From humiliation to vindication, from doubt to recognition. The hotel corridors were quiet now, the emergency systems humming steadily under Eli's careful adjustments. Lena sat beside him, her small hand clutching his, a tangible reminder of why he had fought so fiercely. Guests and staff who had witnessed the unfolding events lingered, their whispers carrying awe, respect, and disbelief. The single father they had underestimated had orchestrated life-saving precision where wealth, status, and authority had failed. The inversion of power was complete. Humility, skill, and courage had triumphed over arrogance and assumptions. Serafina Vale approached slowly, her expression softened with genuine admiration. She had learned the hardest lesson of all, that true authority is earned through competence and composure under pressure, not by title or fortune. "I underestimated you," she admitted quietly. Eli simply nodded, letting the systems speak for themselves. Every stabilized conduit, every synchronized power feed, every steady breath from Lena testified to his mastery and dedication. The security guards who had initially restrained him now stood silently, a mix of awe and respect in their eyes. Whispers from guests spread further into the atrium. "He saved her. All this time, we didn't see. That's incredible." The reversal of humiliation had become public vindication, a lesson in the power of quiet expertise. Eli allowed himself a brief smile, but there was no prideful display, only calm assurance that his daughter was safe and dignity restored. Lena hugged him tightly, her relief palpable. She had been the reason he risked everything, and now, seeing her safe, the fatherly pride and protective instinct that had driven him all along found quiet release. Eli's hidden past, military engineering, crisis response experience, precise technical skill, had made him the only one capable of controlling the chaos. Now, every observer recognized what had been invisible to them before. Skill, courage, and love often come from unexpected places. Serafina stepped back, her posture humbled. She understood that her empire, her protocols, and her authority had been secondary to the calm decisiveness of a man she had ignored. The guests, guards, and staff around them were all silently acknowledging the truth. Eli was a hero, not because of title or wealth, but because he had acted when it mattered most. The hotel, once a place of hierarchy and status, had become a stage for quiet mastery and moral triumph. Eli ensured the final systems were stable, the emergency indicators glowing steady green. The crisis was over, and the threat fully neutralized. Lena's breathing was calm, her small body safe, and every technical hazard mitigated. He stood, looking around at the onlookers, a silent acknowledgement of the reversal of perception, the vindication of skill, and the restoration of dignity. The child, the family, and the community had witnessed not just a technical victory, but the triumph of human expertise, courage, and love over assumption and authority. Serafina Vale now fully recognized the value of humility and respect, while the security staff and guests absorbed the lesson that true competence often comes from those least expected. Eli had turned an unjust situation into a public revelation of mastery, a complete inversion of power and expectation. As he left the suite with Lena safely in his arms, the murmurs of astonished witnesses followed them. The hotel's luxurious corridors, once symbols of status and hierarchy, had become the proving ground for quiet heroism. Every observer now understood it was not wealth or rank that saved lives, it was skill, calm, and dedication under pressure. Eli's hidden expertise had changed perceptions, restored dignity, and ensured safety, all witnessed by those who had underestimated him. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. You can't afford this place. The waitress whispered to a single dad. The owner froze. When he stood up, "Trust me, you'll feel it." And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?